can say 20 to 25% of the market is definitely demanding sustainability. It might or might not be GRIHA. And what has helped it improve is that the policies by the government of India, so we have this thing called the Ministry of Power.
Started recording, if that's okay.
Yes, surely.
Okay. And I took notes on what you just said, but I think I didn't record soon enough to get that in recording. But fortunately, I scribbled down notes. So that was really insightful what you just shared about a number of things. But one thing is how architecture led from your creativity and artistic background. You know, I've been hearing that more and more. So I don't need to interject too much, but because I recorded, I just thought I would say that because I've been hearing architects say it came out of an interest in art, a background in creativity, which is so cool because it's sort of this thought that, well, sustainability isn't just about policy or legal or environmental science. It can come from the artistic and design domains. So if a student envisions, you know, they love art, that doesn't mean they can't contribute to sustainable development. So
correct.
Let's carry on. Back to you, Ophelia and Aafsha.
Your hobbies are really interesting, especially the dog parts. Well, what's your dog name?
It's Migo. My husband loves the Migos and all their music, so we named him after them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That is really awesome. Trees. Wow.
We should be playing that music right now in the background.
Okay. What is your education and work background?
Well, after schooling, like I said, I took up my bachelor's in architecture. So I formally trained as an architect, worked in the core architecture domain, that's as a designer, for about a couple of years, where 1 year was internship and 1 year was full-time work. But that's when I figured out this isn't really my cup of tea. And I wanted to get into something that relates architecture with the broader perspective of energy efficiency, energy transition, decarbonization, etc. You know, like all these terminologies that we use in the realm. And that's when I took up a master's in sustainable design and high performance buildings. So my master's was very much designed for an architect who is interested in learning more about climate and how we can design consciously. So that's where, you know, that aspect of built environment comes in, because energy efficiency or just anything that we talk about, built environment is a very big part of it, because that's where we're all living. So that's how 2 years I spent at university in Australia. I joined the University of Sydney. I trained there in these subjects. And then ever since, I've been working as a sustainability consultant or a researcher. So work-wise, so far, this is the third company where I am as far as the relevant work experience is concerned that all of us are talking about here on this call. So the first place is where I worked a lot around rating systems for buildings, and that's where GRIHA comes in as well. But that was more in the Australian context, you know, so we have Australian counterparts for these ratings. So for example, we have Green Star, Basics, NatHERS, Neighbours, etc., all of that. So I was basically helping clients get their ratings and at the same time also meet the minimum stipulated criteria for the city of Sydney, because everyone has to meet that minimum performance criteria before they get a license to go ahead and construct or renovate a building. So I was that intermediate consultant there. Then due to the pandemic and a few other personal reasons, I moved back to India, and the easiest for me to get into the Indian context became policy. So that's how my second job was all around policy, where I can say my clientele was 50% the government. Like, say, if I have 4 projects, 50% of my work was with the government and 50% was with different CSOs and multilateral and bilateral organizations. So say I worked with UNDP, UNEP, the United Nations in general, the World Bank, the ADB, because all these organizations are pulling in a lot of finance when it comes to energy and energy transition, especially in a developing country like India. So we had a lot of investment coming into India, and we had a lot of work like this coming in. So that was more or less my second role, where I was a researcher. I was writing policy papers. I was helping the government of India implement these policies at the same time. And to strengthen my credentials during that second job, which was also my first job in India, is when I took up the GRIHA certification, because that was more like, how do I put it? That was like the icing on the cake, to basically be able to sell yourself that, okay, I have this certification. I'll be honest, that didn't come in very handy in the day-to-day role that I had, but that was more like a prerequisite that I needed to strengthen my portfolio to get into the market in India, because I was coming from a different market and policy is very different in any country. So when you transition, it becomes a challenge to prove how you fit into the other country, right? And then I recently wanted to go a little more global. So I joined KPMG, which is a consulting firm, earlier September this year. So now my role is more consulting oriented. And with this role, I've stepped into things more than buildings. So I think only 5% of my role since September has been around buildings, but now I'm also working in domains of decarbonizing different building materials, working with industrial parks, ecosystems, nature-based solutions for agriculture and farmers. So more or less conceptually, it's the same work, but the area or the sector of application for me has increased from buildings to maybe just anything that I can think about where these concepts can apply.
Okay.
One thing about GRIHA, just to interject a little bit, is it's exciting for us because we've been reviewing sustainability kind of systems across industries.
Right.
And GRIHA is one that looked like it really came from indigenous thinking and trying to fit more with the regional and natural environment. And so you're the, Ophelia found you're the first person we've talked with who has the GRIHA background. It's pretty exciting. It was hard. We were actually trying to get through to the staff there at GRIHA, and we'll try again at some point. But I wonder, I don't want to derail this conversation, but I am curious about whether GRIHA will likely go beyond India into the broader region, like so many other sustainability schemes or systems have, where they've started, say, in one place and they've broadened from there.
So, maybe I can come in with whatever contextual answer I have at the moment, because I have been a part of quite a few technical committee meetings of GRIHA. I've been a representative from my current company here, So whenever we go, we're talking about what should be the new focus areas. Whenever we are coming up with the next version of GRIHA, should we be focusing on, say, things currently are only all about energy efficiency and decarbonization, right? Like GRIHA is more or less about that. And now we've also started talking about green financing. We've started talking about the carbon market per se. We've started talking about skilling and upskilling of people. So we've started talking about gender equality and things like this. So it's no more about the superficial things that we talk about. It's also about catering to the community that's involved with it. And a lot of our conversations are around this, that how can we modify the upcoming versions of whatever rating system we have in India to be as inclusive as possible of the global conversations around it.
Excellent.
And the only hardship, and this is not coming from the GRIHA perspective, but from a professional's perspective, the only hardship that we faced in exploiting GRIHA within our country is, I won't even say with the knowledge. People are well aware. People are ready. People have the money to apply, to go over and above. But we do not have a proper compliance system in India to monitor how much of it is only on paper versus how much of it is actually being done in practice. Because that's the level where a lot of corruption comes in. And this is purely from a professional's perspective, because we've seen that happen. We see people talk about GRIHA rating. We see people go and submit their papers. We see people get the certification, but at the end of it, there's no operations and maintenance of the building. And if you're not going to keep your building maintained to a certain standard with age, you actually ought to improve, right? Because what's 4-star today is going to become 3-star in 4 years' time, because we're all going to become more stringent with our areas in a way. So that's the part where we fail, because we don't have a lot of compliance checks. We don't have a lot of recertification of the building. Something that's certified once is certified forever. But now we're first trying to mend those problems so that we can start using the certification in a better way within the country, something that's more justified with the broader conversation and perspective.
Excellent. That's so exciting.
What specific occupation or job titles and industries are best served by this GRIHA potential accreditation?
Well, GRIHA's all about buildings. We all can't deny that. But all the different building design professionals, I would say, who are involved in designing, so to every market, we have two sides, the demand and the supply, right? So the demand side, for example, for a building is our material manufacturers and people who are designing things that are going to go into creating a building, right? And so are the supply, actually. It's an intermix, basically. We have different people. We have people who are going to make the building material. We have researchers who are trying to upgrade the building material. So I think that entire value chain of any person who's involved with building design, the value chain can start right from the level of a mason to an architect to a designer to a contractor or a large-scale investor to a resident to a manufacturer. I think all of them need to be mindful of GRIHA, and all of them are heavily impacted by GRIHA, because rating systems like GRIHA can really drive the market. They can really start demanding what the market has to come up with.
Can you throw more light on any other problems that this credential has helped you to solve in your current role or field?
Like I said, I'm honestly not exploiting a lot of GRIHA in my current role. I'm being honest here. But the only thing that GRIHA has particularly helped me with is I volunteer as a mentor at a national level design competition for students who are studying architecture in India. These are students who are into bachelor's and master's degrees of designing and architecture or engineering. So we have something called, and you guys might have heard about it, Solar Decathlon. Solar Decathlon, right? So we have an India version of Solar Decathlon, which is, which was started 3 years back. And the fellow who heads, the director of Solar Decathlon, PC Thomas, he's someone I started working with at my previous organization, because the last place where I worked is one of the 2 funders of Solar Decathlon India. We're the founding organization for that competition in India. But ever since I left them, I started volunteering for them in my new role. So there, all my learnings from GRIHA come in handy to drive the students in the right direction with their designs, because that's a competition about net zero buildings. It's a notch above GRIHA, but well, I feel it's about first meeting the benchmark and then trying to overachieve, right? Because net zero is the next step. GRIHA is a preliminary step. So I think that's the only thing I can think of that's helping me at the moment. Yeah.
Can you give us like either a percentage or a percentage of the examples of industry demand for sustainability competencies, especially those served by the credential or others that you mentioned earlier. You mentioned lots of them when you were, I think you said Australia. So industry demand for them.
It was definitely much higher in Australia, right? Because Australia as a country is a pioneer when it comes to a lot of these conversations, right? So I think Australia and India is not going to be a fair comparison. A developing country versus a developed nation's never fair, right? But if I talk about India, I think the conversation's rising massively. I can say 20 to 25% of the market is definitely demanding sustainability. It might or might not be GRIHA. And what has helped it improve is that the policies by the government of India, so we have this thing called the Ministry of Power that's looking into all the power supplies, etc. The Ministry of Power over the past decade has come up with a lot of mandatory codes. So we have a code called ECBC, that's Energy Conservation Building Code of India. And we have something called, for the ease of your understanding, I won't use the regional name for it. We also have so ECBC has two parts. It's ECBC commercial and ECBC residential. With the government coming into the sustainability market and with the government demanding sustainability from buildings, the demand has risen. And especially in the commercial sector, because that's where people have more money than the residential sector. So I'd say about 25% of India's commercial sector, 25 to 30% is definitely up to sustainability, while residential might be 15 to 20%, a little lesser.
Beyond knowledge and skill, what benefits can educators gain by exploring professional sustainability credentials and industries with their students?
Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm very sure personally. I want to think of my role as a volunteer with the competition I talked about earlier as an educator, right? Like basically I'm educating students there to get to their design. I think that's how, well, if it's helped me, that's how it can help other educators, basically pass on the knowledge generation to generation so we can all start talking about it. Because if I take my example, I'm 28 years today, and the only age at which I heard about energy or sustainability as a terminology was probably when I was 18 years old, right? So now with educators talking more about these terms and with these things coming into our curricula, I think people as young as 3 or 4 year old are talking about these terms. Because one very funny example is going to be, I stay in an apartment where the apartment right next to me, their daughter is 3 years old. And last summer, she got an assignment to knock door to door and ask them to use less electricity because it's more sustainable. And she was only 3 years old back in the day, right? So she comes knocking to my house, asking me to turn off the fan that I'm not using. And I was only sitting with one fan on with 40 degrees in India. And I told her, darling, I need this fan, otherwise I'm going to faint, because that's the bare minimum I need for my thermal comfort. But the interesting thing that came out was I heard about it first when I was 18, and she's heard about it already when she's 3 years old, right? So I think it all long story short, it's all about awareness. And all of us, be it an educator or be it anyone else, can really play an important role in creating that awareness. So yeah, that's been my experience.
What advice do you have for high school teachers who are preparing their college teachers who are preparing their students for these regenerative skills in your field?
I think these small competitions are definitely a very good thing, because I think competitiveness sort of helps all of us learn a lot more rather than making it an obligation for a student to learn about something, right? Like none of us have ever loved giving an exam that was obligatory to give in school. So I think all these fun competitions, games, I see a lot of young students playing games now that talk about this stuff, right? There's a lot of advertisement that's talking about all of this. So I think when teachers want to inculcate this in their students, they'll have to be as creative as possible with the way they're inculcating it in the students. It can't be as direct as how we're taught in college, right? Because that's very technical. We can't go very technical at the younger age. That's at least what I feel. Help them put all the pieces of the puzzle together to learn what matters how in the entire value chain. That's more than enough up until the level where people start getting into universities, and then leave the very, very refined curriculums at universities to teach them the technicality behind stuff, because that's already into place. Why do we start doing the same stuff? Mm-hmm. So I think it's all about, the smaller details at the moment. Yeah, I mean, colleges are already teaching it. I have so much material from my bachelor's and master's school that, it's all technical. It's hardcore technical stuff. So I don't think I'm ever going to give that to a student younger than that age group to learn, because he's going to start hating the subject matter. If at all I have to, I would never give him all of that, for sure.
What advice do you have for high school students that have interest in this? Not high school only, but students that have interest in sustainability, or not only sustainability, but all students?
You're asking school students, right? Who want to learn about
Yes.
I think it's going to be a little tough for me to answer, because I've not seen that side so far personally, because like I've played the different roles of being a researcher or an educator. I've never really interacted about the subject matter with school students, I think, till now. But I think social media is a great way to learn. I mean, if at all there is something you need some idea from me, I think social media is talking so much about these subject matters, etc. So the amount of time they take up to start following Kim Kardashian, they might as well just start following UN and UNEP and UNDP to start learning more about the topic. Like literally, it's as easy as that, to start learning about the conversations and at least be a part of what's happening. So yeah, but like on the curriculum front, I'm not really experienced with that, so I'm not going to comment on that. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Sometimes going to the industry association conferences, which the last few years have mostly been online, I've noticed that there are some young professionals who are in some really interesting roles regarding sustainable development. Like they're coming from the standpoint of, say, finance and creative financing techniques like new bonds for projects and various types of incentives. But I don't necessarily see teachers there. So there's sort of this proliferation of new jobs and new job opportunities, but not necessarily an alignment with the education system or an awareness of these new opportunities for students. So I guess similar to questions Ophelia had asked you, what is your impression of job opportunities? I mean, Ophelia already asked about demand, but maybe a slightly different angle on this. Job opportunities for students. Do you feel like, to what degree do you feel as though opportunity is there for students across the different subjects who are interested in contributing their talents for sustainable development? Are they just going to go into a traditional job and that's it? Or can they channel their talents for regenerative goals?
Right. I think I'm going to talk from the perspective of timeline, right? So students who say students today and are gearing up to get into the job market in another 2 to 4 years timeline from now, I would say would have enough opportunity, but only speaking in context to a developing country, right? I'm not speaking in context to a developed nation. Reason being, we're all getting our policies in place now. Because for you to generate jobs around anything, I think it's very mandatory for you to have a policy around it, because it's easy to do something, but to be able to maintain that change, you need policy and you need some guidelines, you need some frameworks, etc. All of these things to be able to maintain that change or maintain that course of action. So people who are going to jump into that job market in another 3-4 years are going to have ample opportunity to come in from all different perspectives, be it a researcher, be it a tester, be it an educator, be it a consultant, or be it someone like, in a country like mine, the startup culture is very exuberant, where people are coming up with the most interesting and traditional ideas to go right to the ground level and help people, So all of that's going to be good. But if I talk about present day developing country, it's still a bit of a struggle, because all the conversations that the four of us are having today, because we have enough knowledge on the subject matter, it's all very ambiguous and niche for a developing country. The problems at hand are much graver than people talking about sustainability, right? In our countries, if we look at it realistically from the jobs perspective. So, I'm coming from a country where, the percentage of people who are literally struggling to just get enough food, etc., for themselves. So we're still struggling with that literacy rate. But for whatever literate population we have that gets into sustainability, I think it's going to be that massive boom will take about 5 years to come as per the country's plan.
Very
So
interesting.
like a minimum of that 5-year plan, yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of shifting to a more narrow topic of these different systems, these sustainability systems like GRIHA. We're noticing that most of them point to different tools. I mean, there's some that are standard, like the ISO 14001 environmental management series, but there are others that are kind of unique. There's sort of these specialty tools, and there are dozens and dozens of them. And I wondered if among those various tools, there were any that stood out to you as interesting for teachers to introduce to their students, or just interesting for a professional to be aware of and consider learning about.
See, I worked a lot with a tool called Design Builder. I don't know if you've heard much about it.
No.
Okay. So Design Builder is one of the tools that allows you to create a 3D model for any building. And then you're going to set some baseline measures to it that, okay, this is the prerequisite condition in which the building's going to be seated. And then you'll try to implement different learnings from whatever rating system, say, even if it's GRIHA, you try to change the different values of the glass, the roof, the walls, the insulations, everything around the building to see how better the building can perform. And then you compare the two results, your baseline and your improved building, right? And the results you get generally are in terms of the number of comfort hours, because end of the day, that's what we're concerned about. Discomfort versus comfort, right? And we want to reach that level where maximum people are comfortable, because it's always a range. Even the way GRIHA dictates it, it's always a range, because thermal comfort is very adaptive person to person. So Design Builder is one thing that I have used extensively, and that is because I learned it in Australia. It was introduced in Australia, but by an Indian fellow there. And that's why the two markets that he could penetrate were Australia and India. And that's in the region where I worked. So he was my professor at university. I learned from him, and then I came here and I taught the software to a few people whom he wanted me to teach to in India.
Ah.
So Yeah, my experience basically has been with that one software, but it was never very, very GRIHA centered. It was more about the general conversation about making a building sustainable or energy efficient, etc. But for GRIHA particularly, I've really not experienced working with a lot of tools because I've never worked as a GRIHA accreditor. That was always for me an extra knowledge thing that I did.
Okay. One thing about GRIHA, I was noticing, and Ophelia has also been going through, the documents online. It's laid out so beautifully. And we've been through so many association systems, rating systems, certifications, accreditations, labels. And
Right.
GRIHA was just laid out so beautifully. And it even had the standards were accessible. They were free. It was like formatted like a flip book, which you hardly ever see. So it made it more interesting to read it.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to commend GRIHA for that. I know you work with other systems, but it was just fun to go through it. And I guess, I wonder, so you've talked about demand, you've talked about that tool. Is that tool affordable if students or teachers want to get a hold of that software? Would it be kind of expensive, or is it fairly accessible? Design build?
I think when they let out licenses in bulk, it becomes more accessible, right? And I think that's with any software. That's just basic logic. That when you're buying it for a multi-user platform, it becomes more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, this guy whom I'm talking about, the Indian fellow seated in Australia, his name is PC Thomas. He's a very approachable and a very interesting man to speak to also, So if there's a very particular cause behind why we are drafting the learning around the system, etc., and that's conveyed to him and you have a conversation, I would like to believe that there is possibility for negotiation to work out something that works within your program. But that's what I'm thinking, right? Because I know him personally. I still work with him. I speak to him, and he's a very humble man to talk to himself. So I think he'll be open to different ideas and to the possibility of collaborating and making it well suited for himself and for you guys. And another thing I was wanting to tell you for some time now was, if you are really interested to get through someone at GRIHA, our energy efficiency domain within India is very close-knit, right? And I sit in New Delhi. New Delhi is where everything's made. Like, we're the policy hub. We're the hub where all of us keep meeting each other. My colleagues are ex-GRIHA workers or something like that, So it's a very close community. I want to believe that it's not going to be a very big challenge for me to find someone, at least a Spock, with whom you can get the ball rolling. At least your initial conversations. I can't ensure you that I'll get you to the top management right in your first meeting, but I can at least get you to a level where you guys can have the conversation going. You can put across your program, your idea, speak to them, and then take it up from there. But if you just want to get into their system and have at least one meeting with the technical team there, I can try helping you get that sorted.
Part of the reason for it being so intriguing is that of the different systems that we've read about, and it's about 100 different systems around the world with different emphases, whether it's infrastructure or buildings or tourism. Right. GRIHA was the only one that started out with working with nature and understanding our natural environment, and not so immediately technically focused. Eventually, yes, the standard did go there, but it was starting more about how do we work with Mother Nature. And that just was not really so much present, at least not in the beginning in the other standards. There is one through the UK called BRIHA, and it does have a component that requires bringing on ecologist
Yeah.
onto the projects. And that was actually really pretty interesting, because it was sort of, we're not just looking at how to make the building, you know, envelope and technologies efficient, but we're also looking at how are we working sustainably with the whole environment. But GRIHA, it just started that way. And that was one of the reasons I was thinking, well, GRIHA needs to be an international standard, not just focused on India. So I was kind of curious to see it, how it might evolve. But so that's a wonderful offer. And it segues into another thing Ophelia's and Nico are both working on. And we have a green skills education survey, which we're thinking to launch in 8 countries. We have it now at the point where it's a version 3. And we're getting input from association leaders to make sure we're asking the right questions, because it'd be a shame to distribute it among the secondary and tertiary schools, only to find then industry says, well, that's nice, but that's not what we care about. Yeah. So, you know, we think it's probably close. And the other thing is that the guidebook, it's kind of a directory and guidebook that you would be featured in. Okay. Have a description on GRIHA as well. And so we want to make sure that it's accurate, because that would be embarrassing if we publish it for the teachers and it's inaccurate and GRIHA says, oh, that's not how we do it, or that isn't the main thing we wanted to emphasize, or the teachers say, well, I went to the website and that was wrong, or, you know, we want it to be something teachers can really introduce with confidence to their students. So it's been actually very, very difficult for us. We described almost 100 accreditations, and we have charts of the different tools and skills. And as we're going back, now we're in maybe the 3rd draft or 4th draft of many of these. We're finding so many mistakes or things are out of context. And in part, that's because it's changing. The industries are changing. Like, we're finding organizations have merged, or they had 2 certifications. Now they have 5. Yeah. Oh, now they changed the name. Oh, now they made it much more rigorous. And so it seems like every time we get it where we think it's good, it's changed. So we're really eager to make that available to the teachers as soon as we can. So my point being that it would be nice to share the V3 of the survey and the description with someone who can say, oh yeah, you need to add this question, or this question is not relevant, or this description needs to really emphasize this new point, or actually now we have a new title or a new version. So that's the main thing, is to just make sure what we have is accurate for the teachers. And so that offer is amazing. Thank you.
Just one point where you were saying, you know, in India now, I've heard a lot of conversation. Well, I've just heard it here, but I think it applies globally, that a lot of these rating systems are coming together to offer dual ratings, right? That there's a middle point where you reach, although you pay for the ratings to both the organizations, but you just have to make one effort and get both the ratings, sort of a thing. And that's coming into India as well, because I was in one of the committee meetings for UGBC, that's the Green Building Council, the Indian arm to the Green Building Council of the UN, right? And they were also talking about collaborating with another rating system in near future, where they're going to offer that dual rating system, that, okay, you apply for one, you get the other, you apply for the other, you get the one, but it's going to be that partnership. So I think especially when you start seeing these market mechanisms come into things, that means you've already gotten the ball rolling, right? It's like sales and advertisements that we have at different well-established brands. So definitely, I think I will take a little bit of time. So I'm traveling from Friday this week for 10 days for Christmas with my family.
Nice.
It should not be very difficult for me to find someone. So I will try if I can find someone between tomorrow and day after tomorrow for you guys. Please send you the details of an SPOC whom you can get in touch with, who's related to GRIHA more than the kind of knowledge that I have. You might have to wait for the New Year's break to finish up until you can actually schedule the call with them. But I'll try to send you some information between tomorrow and day after tomorrow. And if not, I'll still keep in touch with you. I'll let you know. Then probably when I come back, I'll get back to the assignment on finding someone.
That would be wonderful. And please don't stress yourself. The new year is great. And
Yeah.
I know we need to wrap up the call, but I wonder, Nico, was there anything Nico, we just kind of soldiered on and you didn't get really a chance to ask anything or share anything.
I was just amazed with the application Design Builder.
Yeah.
Because I was just familiar with AutoCAD, Lumion, SketchUp, things like that. But when I tried to search it online, I think this one's like more advanced and more.
All of these things, SketchUp, Lumion. Well, Lumion is for rendering. That's different. Let's not talk about that. But SketchUp, Revit, etc. They all plug into Design Builder, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
You can make your model on SketchUp and then you can plug it into Design Builder and you can retrieve the model, or you can make a simplified version on Design Builder itself. It's just much easier to use than Rhino, Ladybug, etc. That's just a very, very complicated side of it, right? And I struggled passing through those subjects at uni myself, I remember. This was a fair.
Amazing.
Yeah, this is much easier. It was not like a game, like you just make a box model. That's all. To understand the concept is as easy as 4 walls, 1 roof. That's all. Don't design, don't do anything. And keep changing the properties to understand how a better U value or a better R value is going to help your building perform. If you're going to put the longer wall on the north and south axis, or you're going to put the longer wall on the east and west axis, how that's going to impact your building.
Yeah.
Just basic concepts. And these are enough for school students. Which direction do you put your window on? Basically what we say glazing in our technical language, right? And then we have things like window to wall ratio. How much window to give on which side? Even if they play with the software using these very basic things without knowing modeling as such, just making a box model of a room, it's still going to give them a lot of learning because it's a pretty interesting software that can, that way.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Great question, Nico. And it almost sounds like gamifying sustainability, making it fun, trying different variables and learning software at the same time.
Yeah.
Like a win-win, feeding several birds with one hand kind of experience.
Very true.
Well, we're on the hour. You've been super generous with your time, Aafsha, and it's really nice to meet you. I'm so grateful to Aphili for finding you.
Yeah.
And I know she'll be sad that the network disconnected, but I hope that she'll be able to have a long-term association with you and that our program can as well.